The blizzard had no mercy that night, the kind that erased roads, swallowed fences, and made the world feel abandoned by God himself. And through that white, screaming darkness stumbled a young pregnant woman named Eliza. Her coat torn, her boots soaked, her hands numb around her swollen belly, as if holding her unborn child was the only warmth left in the universe. Every step a battle against exhaustion and hunger that had hollowed her body for weeks, because she hadn't eaten properly since the man who promised to love her threw her out when her pregnancy became inconvenient, leaving her with nothing but a suitcase and shame that wasn't hers to carry. And now here she was, alone in the wilderness, contractions whispering warnings, breath coming in shallow gasps as the storm roared like it wanted her erased. When suddenly, through the blur of snow and tears, she saw a dim yellow light cutting through the white. One house, one porch, one final chance, belonging to a rancher named Caleb Hart, a man hardened by years of loss, whose wife and unborn son had died in childbirth 5 winters earlier, leaving him bitter, silent, and convinced that love only existed to be taken away. And as Eliza reached the steps of his porch, her strength finally surrendered, her knees buckling as she collapsed against the wooden door, her fist weakly knocking once, twice, before darkness pulled her under. And inside that house, Caleb was sitting alone by the fire, whiskey untouched, staring at the flames, like they might answer the questions he never asked aloud, when he heard the faint knock so soft he almost ignored it, until something deeper stirred, a memory of another storm, another woman in pain, another night he wished he could undo. And against his own instincts he stood, opened the door, and found her lying there half buried in snow, pregnant, pale, lips blue, breath barely there. And for one frozen second he considered closing the door, because saving her would reopen wounds he'd spent years sealing shut. But then he saw her hand instinctively protect her belly, even in unconsciousness, and something inside him cracked, and he carried her in, laid her by the fire, wrapped her in blankets, spooned warm broth between trembling lips as she whispered apologies, through fever dreams, apologizing for existing, apologizing for being hungry, apologizing for being pregnant. And when she finally woke, terrified, ready to beg, ready to be thrown out again, Caleb didn't shout, didn't judge, didn't ask questions. He only said quietly, with a voice that trembled more than hers, "You're safe here. Storm can't take you tonight." And in that moment, those words, so simple, so human, saved her life more than the fire or the food ever could. Because for the first time in months, Eliza believed she was allowed to live. And as the storm raged on outside, 2 broken souls sat on opposite sides of a room, unaware that fate had tied their survival together. And if this story already has your heart racing, remember to subscribe to the channel, because stories like this, where hope is born in the harshest storms, are exactly why we're here. Morning arrived quietly, as if the blizzard itself felt ashamed for what it had done, sunlight filtering through frost-covered windows to reveal Eliza awake on the couch, her body aching but alive, her baby still moving beneath her ribs, while Caleb stood at the stove pretending not to watch her every breath, afraid that if he looked too closely, she might disappear like the ghosts he carried. And when she finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper, she thanked him and asked how long until she needed to leave, bracing for rejection. But Caleb surprised both of them when he replied, "You leave when you're strong enough, not before." And over the days that followed, strength slowly returned to her bones through warm meals, clean water, and something far rarer, kindness without conditions. While she told him her story in pieces, about being fired when her employer discovered her pregnancy, about sleeping in shelters that turned her away when beds ran out, about walking until the snow swallowed the road. And Caleb listened, jaw tight, because every word reminded him of how his wife had once looked at him, with fear during labor, trusting him to protect her, trusting him with their future, and how he had failed in ways no one else blamed him for but himself. And when Eliza went into labor weeks later, early and terrifying, the storm returned like a cruel echo. Roads impassable, phone lines dead, panic clawing at both of them. And as Eliza screamed through pain and fear, certain she would die like so many women forgotten by the world, Caleb knelt beside her, voice breaking as he held her hand and said the words that had once haunted him, now spoken with fierce promise. "I'm here. I won't leave. Breathe with me." And somehow, through blood and tears and prayers whispered into the storm, the baby arrived, a tiny, furious cry cutting through the night, alive, strong, undeniable, and Caleb fell to his knees, sobbing openly for the first time in years, because life had returned to his house not as a reminder of loss, but as proof that his story wasn't over. And as Eliza held her child, she looked at him and asked why he had saved her. And Caleb answered with the truth he'd been avoiding. "Because once I didn't save someone I loved, and this time I was given another chance." And months later, when spring softened the land and Eliza prepared to leave, Caleb stood on the porch watching her pack, only to realize the house felt empty again already. And before fear could stop him, he said the words that truly saved them both. "You don't have to go. This place, it could be home if you want it." And Eliza cried, not from desperation this time, but from hope, because sometimes survival isn't just about escaping death. It's about being invited into life. Years later, people would say the Hart Ranch survived because of hard work, good seasons, and luck. But the truth lived in quieter moments, in the way Eliza woke before dawn to check the stove and the crib, in the way Caleb fixed fences while humming lullabies he once swore he'd never sing again, in the way the child, whom they named Samuel, grew strong on stories of storms and survival, never knowing how close his life had come to ending before it even began. Because after that winter, the ranch changed in ways no ledger could record. Neighbors slowly returning, once they realized the bitter widower now shared his land with a woman whose kindness softened even the roughest hands. And though whispers followed her at first about where she came from, about a baby born out of wedlock, Caleb shut them down with a single look, standing beside her in church, in town, at the fence line, as if daring the world to challenge the family he had chosen. And Eliza learned what it meant to live without fear of being discarded, her strength blooming alongside the crops, her laughter returning in pieces, until one day she caught herself singing while hanging laundry, freezing, mid-note, because she realized she was no longer waiting for the other shoe to drop. While Caleb wrestled with guilt that hadn't vanished but transformed, the pain of his past no longer a chain but a reminder of why he must protect what he had now. And when Samuel took his first steps across the same porch where his mother once collapsed, Caleb watched with tears blurring his vision, understanding at last that life didn't replace what was lost, it built something new from the ruins. And the final test came one winter when another storm rolled in, fierce and unforgiving, and a knock echoed at the door late at night, freezing Eliza's blood as memory surged back. And when Caleb opened it, there stood a young man shivering, desperate, alone. And without a word, Caleb stepped aside, letting him in while Eliza lit the fire, realizing this was the true legacy of that first night, not just survival, but the decision to keep the door open, to answer suffering with shelter. And as the storm raged outside once more, warmth filled the house again, proof that compassion multiplies when it's passed forward. And if this story has stayed with you until now, if it reminded you that one choice can change generations, don't let it end here. Subscribe to the channel, because every story you hear is a reminder that hope doesn't arrive loudly. It arrives knocking softly, waiting for someone brave enough to open the door.